Right now, somewhere, someone is scrolling through their phone and laughing at a meme. A tiny burst of dopamine, gone in half a second, forgotten by dinner. You do this a dozen times a day without thinking about it. But strip away the phone, the screen, the internet, strip away even language as we know it, and go back far enough and you find something strange waiting for you. The first time a human being ever made another human being laugh on purpose. Not by accident, not by falling over, on purpose. So who did it? What did they say? And why, of all the things our ancestors could have invented first, did they seemingly invent the insult before they invented the wheel? Let's start with the oldest joke we can actually prove existed. In 2008, folklorist Paul MacDonald from the University of Wolverhampton led a project trawling through ancient texts to find the earliest recorded jokes from different civilizations. The winner, dated to around 1900 BCE, comes from ancient Sumer, written on a clay tablet in cuneiform. Translated, it reads roughly, something which has never occurred since time immemorial. A young woman did not fart in her husband's lap. That's it. That's the punchline. A 4,000-year-old fart joke, preserved in baked clay, outliving empires, outliving entire languages, outliving the pyramid's original limestone casing. Toilet humor, it turns out, is not a modern low point. It might be humanity's oldest hobby. But here's where it gets interesting. Jokes need language, sure, but they don't need writing. Writing is only about 5,000 years old. Humans, in our current anatomical form, are roughly 300,000 years old. That leaves an enormous silent gap, hundreds of thousands of years, where people were almost certainly laughing at each other, and we have no way to know what about. So if we can't find the first joke in the archive, maybe we can find it somewhere else. Maybe we can find it in our bodies. Laughter itself is older than jokes, older than language, older, arguably, than humans. In 2009, primatologist Marina de Villa-Ross at the University of Portsmouth recorded the sounds of tickled chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, orangutans, and human infants, then built an acoustic family tree from the recordings. The laughter tracked genetic relatedness almost perfectly. Chimps and bonobos, our closest relatives, laughed in a way statistically closest to us. The implication is unsettling in a good way. Laughter didn't start with us. We inherited it. Somewhere around 10 to 16 million years ago, a common ancestor of humans and great apes was already making a rhythmic, panting vocalization during rough-and-tumble play. And that sound is the direct ancestor of your laugh at a Tuesday night comedy special. So laughter came first, as a survival tool, a way for two animals to signal, this fight is not a real fight, this bite is not a real bite. We are safe. Play, essentially, needed an off switch that both parties could recognize instantly. That's likely the actual origin of your laugh. Not comedy, but a safety signal between bodies. Jokes, the verbal kind, came much, much later, as a way to trigger that ancient safety signal using nothing but words. Which raises the question, once humans had language, what was the very first thing they figured out how to say that made someone else make that ancient safety sound? The leading theory among linguists and anthropologists points towards something surprisingly aggressive: mockery. Not wordplay, not irony, not a clever twist ending, teasing. Evolutionary anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies, groups like the Hadza in Tanzania, whose lifestyle offers a rough window into how early humans may have lived, have documented something researchers call insult games, or ritualized teasing. Anthropologist Polly Wisner spent years recording nightly conversations around Jews/Hawansi campfires in the Kalahari Desert in the 1970s and again decades later, and found that a huge percentage of fireside talk, sometimes well over a third, was joking, ridicule, and gentle mockery aimed at people who had bragged, hoarded meat, or gotten too full of themselves. This wasn't cruelty for its own sake. It was social maintenance, a tool for keeping egos in check in small groups where nobody could afford a group member becoming dangerously arrogant or selfish. What the research doesn't tell you outright, but strongly implies, is that humor may have evolved as a form of policing. A group of 30 people surviving together cannot tolerate a bully or a hoarder for long, but violence is costly and risky. Mockery is cheap. It's fast. It draws blood without drawing blood. Laughter, aimed correctly, is a weapon that heals the group instead of harming it, deflating the overconfident without anyone needing to throw a punch. So the first real joke was probably not a pun, and it was probably not clever. It was probably an insult, aimed at someone who was getting a little too big for their loincloth, delivered around a fire, met with the exact same panting laugh a chimpanzee makes when a play fight ends safely. There's a study moment worth sitting with here. In 2016, evolutionary psychologists Gil Greengross and Jeffrey Miller ran research on humor and status, finding that in modern social groups, the ability to produce spontaneous, cutting humor correlates strongly with perceived intelligence and social rank, and that this appears to be a genuinely cross-cultural, deeply rooted pattern, not a modern invention of stand-up comedy clubs. Being funny, in other words, has been a mating and status display for a very long time. The class clown and the campfire heckler may be running the exact same ancient software. Now stretch even further back, past language altogether, to something almost too strange to picture: humor before words existed at all. Primatologists have documented chimpanzees engaging in what looks unmistakably like practical jokes. A chimp will offer another an empty hand, pretending to hold food, then snatch it back and watch the other's reaction, sometimes repeating the trick and appearing to enjoy the anticipation of the reveal. That's not language. That's not even close to language, but it has the exact bones of a joke: setup, expectation, subversion, payoff. If that's real, and many primatologists believe it is, then the machinery of humor, the actual cognitive trick of building a false expectation and then breaking it, may predate spoken words by millions of years. Words didn't invent the joke. Words just gave the joke a script. So here's roughly the order of events, as best as science can currently reconstruct it. First, deep in our primate past, playful roughhousing needed a safety signal, and laughter was born as that signal, millions of years before any human walked upright. Then, still without language, some clever ancestor discovered that you could fake someone out on purpose, building expectation and shattering it, purely through action, purely for the reaction. Then, once language arrived, that same trick got attached to words, and one of the very first uses humans found for their brand new gift of speech was aiming it at each other's egos around a fire, keeping the group honest, keeping the bragging in check. And then, thousands of years after that, someone in ancient Sumer thought a fart joke was worth carving into permanent clay, and honestly, they weren't wrong. What has changed since then is mostly delivery, not substance. We've gone from campfires to clay tablets to printed joke books to radio to television to a screen in your pocket that can deliver 10,000 jokes an hour from strangers on the other side of the planet. What we may have lost, somewhere in that acceleration, is the function. The original joke wasn't built to entertain a stranger for 3 seconds and vanish. It was built to hold a small group of survival-dependent people together, to deflate the dangerous ones gently, to signal safety during risk, to bond people who needed each other to live through the night. Modern comedy still does flashes of that, but the campfire got very, very large. And most of the people laughing with you now will never actually meet you. So the next time you laugh, really laugh, at something someone says to you in person, consider what you're actually doing. You're not just appreciating a clever sentence, you're performing a gesture older than language, older than fire, older than your own species. A small shared signal that echoes all the way back through 100 fireside insults, 1,000 chimpanzee hand tricks, and one very old, very human joke about a woman who, remarkably, did not fart in her husband's lap. We built cities, wrote symphonies, split the atom, and somehow, underneath all of it, we're still just trying to make the person next to us make that same ancient sound.